All right, so probably a lot of you have seen this meeting between the American president and the El Salvadoran president. Obviously, El Salvador is a small country. The U.S. had been at war with it, had been involved in dirty wars there throughout the 1980s. It is generally considered an underdeveloped country and still is, but President Bukele has gained a lot of global attention, in part because the government under him just rounded up thousands and thousands of people who were not convicted of crimes, but were quote unquote suspects in gang violence. No question, a lot of them have been swept up who are innocent, many of them guilty, and they're put into not ordinary prisons, but prisons that are some of the cruelest, most dehumanizing, and exploitative in the world. They're purposely meant to dehumanize. Bukele talks openly about how the fact that the prisons pay for themselves because they force the prisoners to basically engage in slave labor. They love to take videos and photos and make all kinds of films showing the dehumanization process. And rights have been run roughshod over in El Salvador. There's no free speech. You can't criticize Bukele. If you're a journalist, you get attacked by the government. And if you do so, there's certainly no rights of due process. People who go into this prison are meant to stay there for life. There's violence in this prison, not from the prisoners, but from the guards. Many of them actually have died. And it's basically a place that you're intended never to leave. And a lot of people in El Salvador, as often happens with authoritarianism, love their leader. They love their authoritarian leader because it has had results. It has significantly lowered crime in a place once plagued by a lot of violence. It has now become significantly safer. In general, though, we in the United States, our founding values, our Constitution, the founding as based in the values of the Enlightenment, don't believe that we should sacrifice rights for safety. The whole Constitution, in fact, is intended to elevate the rights of people, even if it means impeding our ability to catch criminals. The founders understood, because they were waging a war against the British Crown, that all the rights of the British Crown routinely invaded in the name of stopping crime, invading people's homes with no search warrant, just rushing them through a trial with no rights if they thought they were guilty. Those were the things that had to be avoided if America was really going to be free and democratic. And these are the things in the Constitution that you can go and read, none of which at this point is available in El Salvador. So there is a little bit of an oddity that the person most responsible for this authoritarianism, you can even call it tyranny in El Salvador, although with positive results that many of the people in El Salvador seem to like. Again, it's not uncommon for people to love their authoritarian leader. People crave security, crave protection. If you promise them that in exchange for something they fear, they'll be happy to give up rights. We've seen that in American history. That's what the war on terror was. It's what all sorts of wars in the United States have entailed, including the Cold War. And it's a very common formula that the American founders set out most to avoid. So it's a little strange, to put that mildly, to see a political faction, what do you call it, MAGA movement or nationalists, whose primary objective or aspiration is to preserve American values, venerating basically a tin pot dictator at this point of a small Central American country as someone who is not just a close ally of the United States, who we pay to imprison people, even though they've never been convicted of crimes. We just send them there when their only crime is having entered the United States illegally, although some people have been sent there who haven't entered illegally, who are in the United States legally seeking asylum, who came through a legal port on the border, port of entry, as people are told to do. But in any event, it's not just that we're allied with him, but a lot of people seem to really admire Bukele, almost suggesting that we in the United States need to use him as a model, to use El Salvador as a model for how our own country should be, in part to fight crime, in part to fight the obvious problem that most people agree is a real problem of people pouring into the country illegally. So the question becomes, how much liberty are we going to sacrifice? How many constitutional rights are we going to repudiate in the name of these other goals? Whether, we have to fight crime as though crime is rampant, more so than usual, or because of the problem of people in the country illegally. Now, the laws of the United States make it very easy to deport someone who's in the United States illegally. You don't even have to go to a real court. You just issue a removal order. You go to a special deportation court that's not even part of the Article 3 judiciary. It's just inside the Department of Justice. And they just rubber stamp it. All they want to know is the person in the United States here legally? And if the person can't show they are, and it's very easy, it's just here's my green card, here's my visa. If they don't have that, it means they've entered the country illegally. The court approves their deportation. But deportation means sending them back to their country of origin. And what has been so controversial is not that. President Trump ran 3 times on a pledge of sending people in the country illegally to deport them back to their country of origin. People voted for him in the last election based on that promise of mass deportations. Polls show that's what people want. That is not the issue. There are people, I'm sure, so I don't want to say nobody, but most people involved in these debates have no problem with legal deportation of people in the country illegally. That's what Trump pledged to do. He had a Democratic mandate for that. Polls show that's what people want. That's not the issue. What's happening is much, much different. And we covered this before, that people aren't being sent back to their country of origin. They're being sent to El Salvador, a country they've never been to. They have nothing to do with. They're not citizens of, never have been. And they're not just being sent there. They're being imprisoned in one of the worst prisons on the planet, while the United States pays for their imprisonment. And they're being imprisoned for life based on allegations of criminal activity. Oh, you're a member of Tren de Agua or some other violent gang. No due process at all for that allegation. We're imprisoning people for life. We're paying for their imprisonment in a foreign country based on accusations that are never proven. And all of this, we've covered this before, but all of this became severely escalated this week when President Trump, both in his meeting with President Bukele, as well as to the White House press corps that then gathered, as well as in subsequent interviews, said that he doesn't just want to send people in the country illegally to El Salvador. He also wants to send American citizens who have been convicted of violent crimes to El Salvador as well. Take American citizens, deport them to El Salvador to disappear in this prison. That's one of the worst human rights abuses of the world, and that President Bukele himself says is designed to make sure nobody really ever gets out of. And that is a radical theory when you're talking about deporting American citizens. American citizens cannot be deported. There's never been any kind of principle that suggests that can happen, let alone sent to a foreign prison, not on American soil, meaning you don't have access to your family, you don't have access to your lawyers, you don't have access to American courts if your human rights are being violated. These are all rights of American citizenship, guaranteed by the Constitution, all of which would be denied if President Trump's proposal went forward. Now, as I said, President Trump often says things that he doesn't really mean, and that's why I personally don't believe in becoming hysterical every time he opens his mouth and says something, because a lot of it is intentionally provocative or designed to achieve some other goal. But when you're talking about in the context of a lot of already radical proposals, like sending people in the country to El Salvador to be imprisoned for life with no due process, even sending people there when there's a 9-0 Supreme Court order saying you have to get them back and refusing to do so, meaning 9-0, all the judges on the Supreme Court, the American right, the Trump movement loves, like Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, 3 of them Trump appointees on the court, all nine of them unanimously said you have to facilitate the return of this one person who was in the country illegally, but a deportation court ordered not be removed pending further processes. Trump administration itself admits they did it by accident. It was a bureaucratic error, but now they and Bukele are saying, there's nothing we can do. We're not going to try and get him back to the U.S., even though there was a deportation hold on him from a real court, followed by a 9-0 ruling from the Supreme Court that they have to do everything they can to facilitate his return. But let me start with this proposal about citizens, American citizens, being sent to El Salvador. Is something Trump said repeatedly throughout this week. And I don't think he was kidding. Whether he's kidding or not, it still deserves comment. Not hysteria, but commentary. Here was the first time Trump said it when he was, this was, I believe, Fox News covering the Oval Office meeting.
He's made it a very safe place. People go and they feel very secure and safe. He's also built one, but other also prisons, very big ones. And we're using his system because we're getting rid of our criminals from out of the United States who were allowed to come in by Biden. We're getting them out. And the president is helping us with that, President Bukele. So I was very impressed with him, really very impressed. Great guy.
Could we use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals?
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
The ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that.
So there's talking about homegrown citizens, people who were born in the United States, grew up in the United States, and if it wasn't clear, he made explicitly clear when asked other times that he means American citizens. First of all, here is him being asked in the Oval Office whether American citizens could be deported to El Salvador.
You mentioned that you're open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S. citizens, fully naturalized American?
If they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old, and if they rape 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn, yeah, that includes them. What, do you think there's a special category of person? They're as bad as anybody that comes in.
I mean, that should be a shocking comment. Yes, American citizens are actually a special category in the United States. The reality is, and the Supreme Court has ruled this over and over, including just 2 weeks ago by a 9-0 ruling, that everybody in the United States, not just citizens, even people here legally in the U.S., have a right to due process before they're sent to prisons, to have a court review whether the allegations against them are valid, are sustainable by evidence. But American citizens, nobody disputes that American citizens have all the guarantees of the Bill of Rights. Even if you commit crimes, you don't lose your protections of your citizenship. You stripping you of your citizenship or deporting you are not recognizable punishments under the law or the Constitution for committing a crime. In fact, some of the guarantees of the Bill of Rights are explicitly meant to protect criminals. People accused of vicious crimes still have the right to due process. They still have the right to an attorney. They have the right against self-incrimination. They have a right to a speedy trial. Even people who are convicted are protected against what the Constitution calls cruel and unusual punishments. And the founders talked about all the time the need to protect the rights, not just of the innocent, but the guilty. So when Trump says, why, American citizens, are they in a special category when it comes to shipping them to El Salvador? Yes, American citizens are in a special category with a lot of rights. For example, if you're an American citizen, you cannot be refused entry in the United States. If you come back to the United States, you can be arrested at the border, but you cannot be refused entry. That's one of the rights of citizenship. And even if you're convicted of crimes, you still have rights in prison. You have the right to speak to your lawyer. You have the right to bring what you claim are legal or constitutional violations to an American court. You have the right, if there's new evidence discovered, to contest your conviction and to ask a court to overturn it, which happens quite frequently. You can't be subject to abusive prison conditions or cruel, and these are all foundational American rights for American citizens. If you're comfortable with this idea that no, there's nothing special about being an American citizen, they can be treated exactly the same way as people in the country illegally, even when it comes to deporting you if you're convicted of a crime. I just want you to think about what would happen if the next Democratic president, I don't know, Gavin Newsom or whoever, Gretchen Whitmer, Pete Buttigieg, decides that people who committed violent crimes in connection with January 6th, or if there's another protest like it and it spills into violence, yeah, they're Americans, but they're going right to a dungeon in El Salvador. If you believe that American citizens can be deported to El Salvador, and not just to El Salvador, but to one of the world's worst prisons, you don't have any rights there. You don't have a right to speak to a lawyer. You don't have a right to file court hearings and appeals or motions or new lawsuits. You have nothing. No rights. All your rights are stripped from you, including rights guaranteed by the Constitution. If you believe Trump can do that, then Why can't the next Democratic president do that? And it's true for all the things Trump's doing. Requiring colleges and universities not to hire certain professors who have certain ideologies, putting speech codes on college campuses as a condition for getting federal funding, as what happened with Harvard. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But I just want to focus a little more on this because, again, I understand how Trump functions. I've watched him for a long time. I'm not somebody who goes insane and gets hysterical the minute Trump opens his mouth and just says something off the cuff. This is not off the cuff. He said it multiple times. Here's another part of his conversation that was kind of in private with Bukele, but not really because he knew there were cameras there. He's very press savvy. He understands that this was being recorded. And here's what he said with Bukele.
Demanded the people wanted to change the country, and they wanted to. He demanded, they love you, they love what you do. I'm not your supporter. I want him to do, for homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said, homegrowns are next. The homegrowns, built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's big. All right? It's not big enough. No, yeah. Come on. So this is a much different office than you.
All right, there's Trump saying to Bukele, look, I don't want to just send foreign nationals to El Salvador. I don't want to just send people who enter the country illegally. I want to send our own citizens, homegrown criminals. So we need you to build 5 more prisons like the mega prison that you built. Now, maybe there's a little bit of a facetiousness in there, but when it aligns with everything he's saying publicly in the press briefing in the Oval Office, when he's sitting with Bukele in interviews after, sorry, that's just too radical of an idea not to object to now, not wait until it starts to happen. And this is one of the things that has been a concern, which is the idea that all these people being deported from American campuses for the crime of protesting or denouncing Israel is not just, it's not people in the United States illegally. They're all people here legally. Some of them have student visas, but a couple of them now are green card holders, at least a couple, meaning they're intended to be permanent residents in the United States on the path to citizenship. So the question then becomes, what's next? We've gone up the scale. Illegal, people in the U.S. illegally, people who have work in student visas, people who have green cards. And the concern is the next step is people who are naturalized Americans, people who weren't born in the United States, who didn't begin life as a citizen, but who became American citizens during their life. People like Elon Musk, Melania Trump, Sebastian Gorka, David Sachs. We never had this distinction before between Americans born on American soil who are real Americans and naturalized Americans who are something less. There's no category or hierarchy of American citizenship. All American citizens are the same. But based on things Marco Rubio has said, you can easily envision the State Department saying, oh, these people who participated, even citizens, in protest against Israel, they obtained their citizenship on false pretenses because they didn't tell us they were going to do that. As if they were prescient enough to know that there was going to be this incomparably horrific war in Gaza when they came 4 years ago or 3 years ago or 7 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And then after that, if you can do that to naturalized citizens, you can do that to citizens. And that's not a slippery slope hysterical argument. That's the way you have to think as a citizen. In which direction is this going? Where does this end? And so the fact that Trump is now talking about American citizens as not being special in any way when it comes to things like deportation, and even openly talking about sending them to El Salvador, that is a sign that that's something to be concerned about. Not hysterical over, but concerned enough to report it, to analyze it, to object to it, to explain why it would be a radical departure from everything that America has ever stood for since its founding. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.